Welcome back, and in this video, let's take a deeper look into what exactly is happening and how you can make your own custom scripts as well, so as to make the whole process a bit easier for you to understand. So to begin with, I'm going to go ahead and start with explaining this bash script itself. First things first, like I said in the last lab also, this script over here runs whenever you click on the run test button you see on the bottom left. Right? So this is the first script which gets invoked. Since we use bash shell, it starts with bin bash. Then we set E1. That means whenever an error happens in the script, just abort and give you an error. So the first thing we do inside of this vtest testing framework thing is that we install vtest first, right? So what we do is install vtest in the user directory, home dammer code /home/dammer/code. This is a directory which is the default working space of every user. So if you print working directory over here, you're going to see this right here. This particular thing right here is what opens by default for every single user, and any file, any folder which the user creates with this UI over here, it's visible inside of this home dammer code directory, right? This is not changeable. This view cannot be changed, which the user sees on the Explorer. This code directory is what the user has to always work in. So what we do is we navigate to that directory and we add vtest as a dev dependency. Then we create a lab test directory where we would place all our testing code. Then you see we have a block of move test file name. So you see this test file name under $test file name, it's actually an environment variable. So you can echo this over here and you're going to see that it says you home dammer.test.js. Now I do not recommend hard coding this anywhere because we can change this randomly for users, but this particular $test file name variable points to the path where the test file will be. It's not the actual test file, right? It's not the test file. If you go, for example, and if you try to cat this, you're going to see there is no test file, but this is a path where the test file would be available. Now, what is this test file exactly? This test file is the code which you wrote inside this particular tab, right? So this particular code base gets copied inside a file of $test file name, right? What we are doing here is that whatever path it was cloned, we are just moving it inside our lab test folder to keep it close to the vtest testing utility, because that's how vtest works. But this is not the only file which we need, right? Because we need to set up a few more files. Therefore, we just use bash directly to create those files, because this file, the content of this file can be dynamic, but rest of the files are fixed. So you see, we create a vtest configuration file over here where we have the globals true as set. That is why you don't need to import, describe, and test. If you set this as false, then you would also have to write an import statement over here, importing describe and test utilities from the vtest framework. Then we create another file known as process.js, because this setup over here, it will run the vtest infrastructure properly. But remember, I told you that playgrounds fundamentally map to a Boolean array, right? So these three challenges will map to a Boolean array written to a specific file, whether, let's say, if this Boolean is written, then this challenge will become green, and this one will stay red, right? Because this is how it is mapped right now. So what we want to do is we want to have a process.js file, which actually does this computation, crunching the result of the vtest framework into a Boolean array. So what we do is we require the file system, we require a payload.json. This payload.json is created by this vtest run command. You can see that we actually output the result of the vtest inside payload.json, right? So we require it and we test it like this. We extract out the values as a Boolean array like this. Now this depends on, the vtest testing framework, how we have set this up, but this block over here requires us to write the test in this particular format, right? A single describe block and then multiple test blocks. Once we have a format like this, we just have to check all the tests which have passed. Again, I'm saying that this is very specific to vtest and this is boilerplate code. You don't have to understand this in order to write test, but I'm just going through that in this video so as to make it simple. And then finally, we write the result of that Boolean array into the file which I was mentioning earlier, which is inside process.env.unit_test output file. Again, this is an environment variable which is red if I go to the playground, and if we say echo this environment variable, you can see this is again path to a file. So we write to a particular file over here as a Boolean array. Now finally, we run the test using a yarn command, yarn vtest run. So it runs the test and it generates an output file with the results inside payload.json. And then finally, we execute this particular command, which runs this particular small script and creates or writes this particular result inside the output file. Now, the moment this bash script ends, what we do is we read this file, this unit test output file, and we try to determine what the output is written, what the output is inside this particular, what the contents are of this particular file. Once we read it like this is an array, what we do is we mark these challenges green, green, and red according to that. As simple as that. So you see, this script is responsible for doing everything which the user eventually then ends up seeing over here. Now, if this is too overwhelming, let me just go ahead and simplify this a little bit for you. Let's remove this whole script right here and just have node test file name. What's this doing is that whatever we write inside, let's say this edit test file, would be executed as it is, and whatever we wrote inside this bash script on writing this to unit test output file, it is now our responsibility to do that inside of this particular testing file. And if you click on this testing template and if you select Node.js Puppeteer, you're going to see that is exactly what we do in this particular case. So you see, we get FS and we get Puppeteer. Puppeteer is a headless Chromium browser. This is something which you can use for end-to-end testing of, let's say if you're building a web-based lab. So you can use something like this where you call the node script directly, and this node script right here is responsible for adding all the tests into a results array. So you can see this results array is a Boolean array, and we perform certain tests, and every single time the test passes, we push true. Every single time it fails, we push false. Similarly in the second test block, and then we finally write it and we close the browser, right? So this might seem now familiar what we were doing in bash in the earlier setup with vtest. We are doing it directly inside the node script in case of Puppeteer, right? So again, like I said, use these two blocks, this particular block, the bash command execution, and this particular file, which is Node.js in this case, could be any other file as well, could be Python, could be C, C++ code. Use them to your advantage to form certain tests which execute whatever they want to do, and finally write a Boolean array to this particular file. You can do anything you want over here, but finally, once you're done, just write a Boolean array to this particular file and we will take it forward from there onwards. I hope this tutorial helped understand more things. If not, then don't worry, just watch the last two videos, this one and the last one again. And we're going to be setting a lot more labs in future, and there's a lot of documentation as well. So go through that as well and you will get a better clarity of what is going on here.